Hey, welcome back to Common Sense OT Security, where we discuss OT security topics through the lens of common sense. Today, we check out another paper by CISA, which is called Cybersecurity Performance Goals, and I think it's really worthwhile your time. It actually contains some good stuff. But first, let's check out what this is all about. So they tell us it's voluntary practices with high impact security actions that outline the highest priority baseline that measures businesses and critical infrastructure owners of all sizes can take to protect themselves against cyber threats. Well, that's a bold statement. But you know what I like a lot about this paper or this piece of work. It's not really a paper. You will see that. So it's like a dialogue thing. You can just click through it on their website. I've put the link in the description of the video. So it's, if you scroll down here, you will see it's rather brief, even if you expand all those various topics. That's good, in my opinion, right? Because nobody wants to read another 3,000 paper document such as 62443. And if you look at the structure, how this document, how these topics are structured, what do we see? Govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. What does this remind you of? Think about it. Any guess? Have we seen that before? Yes, we did see that before in the NIST cybersecurity framework. So the various chapters, if you will, of that document correspond with the various action items or categories of the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is not a bad thing. So I'm always in favor of alignment from different organizations when it comes to security methodologies or approaches. Unlike what I have discussed last week with SANS. SANS came up with their own top cybersecurity controls, OT security controls, or whatever they call it, which don't match NIST cybersecurity framework, CISA 2443, or any other of these well-established frameworks. So I think that's a plus. CISA doesn't invent their own nomenclature. They tie it to the NIST cybersecurity framework, which I would imagine you are familiar with already. And for these various topics, now they go into some level of detail, as you can see here. And again, what I like about this is they don't go too deep. They just provide an outline for what they believe are high impact security actions for the highest priority baseline. I like it. So let's check it out. First of all, why do we need to focus on the governance here? And that is certainly the same thing within the cybersecurity framework. So that inner circle, that inner yellow circle was introduced with this cybersecurity framework version 2. And why is that a thing? I think it's worthwhile discussing, because many people think, oh, OT security, that's a bunch of network anomaly detection stuff. Actually, it's not. So it's not just a technical matter. And the governance idea or approach highlights one very important issue. If you don't organize for OT security, you're just wasting time and effort. Right? So for that reason, in any organization, you must somehow embed what you intend to do, your activities, your technology, etc., in an organizational process. Why is that so important? Let me just give you one crucial reason here. One crucial reason, and that is, if you don't have this organizational structure, you won't have budget. And as you know, without budget, nothing is going to happen. So this is where budget allocation comes in. It doesn't come in in all those other aspects of this approach, like protection, etc. Budget comes in here in the governance piece. And then they go into detail. So it starts with establishing responsibilities, roles and responsibilities. So you have to dedicate those various tasks to actual people. And those people doesn't necessarily need to be staff members. You can certainly also outsource particular activities. You can use consultants, you can use vendors, but you need to have somebody in charge of those various activities. Risk address, blah, 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 accountability, investment, or effectiveness. Okay, so they go into a little bit explanation here. And if you ask me, I think this is more written for management, which I believe is a good thing, because this is where most OT security activities fail. They don't get sufficient support from management because nobody ever made an effort to actually pitch the whole idea to management in a proper way. So one other thing that I like about this document from CISA, in several of these items, they include something specific for OT. So obviously our good people at CISA are aware of some subtle differences between OT and IT, and every now and then they get a little more specific, like in this case, establish and maintain continuous collaboration between IT and OT teams in order to streamline processes, enhance security measures, and boost operational effectiveness. I like it a lot, if only for the reason that I lean out of the window now. So if only for the reason that most OT security efforts, at least those that I have seen in 20 years of consulting, failed because of infighting between IT and OT. So that's, I think, a very, very important point to highlight here. Next, manage cybersecurity oversight. Blah, blah, blah. Policies are established. Recommended actions, policies for managing cybersecurity programs are reviewed, blah, blah, okay. OT-specific policies and procedures should consider the limitations of the existing cybersecurity, IT cybersecurity program to identify priorities for critical operational functions, blah, blah, blah. I like it a lot. So they are highlighting the fact here that OT policies in many cases are, or must be, different from IT. But very simple example, if your IT policy tells administrators to keep their systems up to patch, well, good luck with that in OT. It won't happen because you cannot patch, let's just say, a Windows 7 box anymore, or Windows XP for that matter. Also, I think it's really worthwhile highlighting the point that you must have policies. So it's not just technology alone. I think it's worthwhile pointing out, because these days we have so many people in the OT security space who seem to be under the impression that if you only have decent detection technology, then you're golden, which is certainly nonsense. It's just one tiny little piece in the puzzle. So they put the focus on policies, very important. Impact high, I would agree. Then manage incident response plans. This thing I don't really get why it pops up here, because they have two chapters about incident response. So I think it's a little bit odd, but anyhow, for OT, incident response plans account for specific safety and containment considerations which differ from existing IT plans and priorities. You're goddamn right about that. So you have to consider those, I don't know, 500 different private networks that you find in OT. You don't have that in IT. Supply chain incident reporting and vulnerability disclosure. Yes, that is something that becomes more and more important. And finally, manage risks from managed service providers. I will probably extend this to anything you're running in the cloud, right? Or these days, anything you're doing when it comes to AI, if you happen to use a public AI service such as OpenAI. So all good points. But now, let me ask you, is this list complete? In your opinion, is this complete? I mean, I shared already one, I wouldn't even say criticism, with the incident response plans. Seems a little bit odd to me that they pop up here. But if you look at those 5 items here, could it be that they have missed something very important? What could that be? I think they do. And what could that be? So in my opinion, the important, super important item that they have missed is auditing. If you have your policies set up and you never audit your policies, you don't have governance. So governance without audits doesn't exist. And that is something I believe they should have included here as just another item. Because if you only define your policies, etc., how would you know that anybody actually cares? And this is one thing that we used to hammer in our consulting days, a long time ago. But basically, we identified, well, even those organizations that do have their security policies, they never bother to actually audit the policies. That led to a very bizarre observation in one case, which I will never forget. So during our interviews on site, we asked users about the policies, which policies they follow, etc., and only to get the answer, I don't know of any policies. And then we got back to the IT security folks who were running the OT security thing, which is pretty commonplace, only to figure out that they had forgotten to give those users the access rights to the policies. So even though policies existed, nobody of the affected personnel was aware of them because they didn't even have the access rights. So you need to audit. And fortunately, in some critical infrastructures, that is even mandatory, right? So when you're regulated, usually the regulator will audit you, and that's a good thing. I mean, come on. So the regulator, depending on their knowledge and capabilities, they might do a bad job at the audit. But in principle, I think you get the point, right? So it's not even worth the time to write policies if you don't have the intent to actually perform audits. And those audits will then need to be presented to the people who actually pay for the party, which is management. So I think it's absolutely vital that in your OT security program, you include this feedback cycle where usually that happens annually at the end of the year, might be the fiscal year, might be the calendar year. You compile your audit results in a report. That is super, super important because that tells management that you're actually doing something. They will see the results and they can then make up their mind if they're happy with what they see with those results. And I can promise you one thing. It will be very difficult to go into the discussions for the budget for the next cycle if you present shitty audit results. And let me be very clear about that. That doesn't imply, well, we have so many outdated operating systems, etc. So high risk is not the same as a shitty audit result. What you need to present is an audit, a report that's on point, that highlights, for example, that high risk. And if you do that in a credible way, that is your avenue to the budget discussion, right? That's your segue. And by the way, since you're talking about this, I have all these good ideas how to address this in the next cycle, but I need more budget for that. So that's my 5 cents here. They forgot the audit. Fortunately, in OT base, it's automated already. You can do automatic audit. I'm just saying. Just saying. So let's get back to the document. Next chapter, identify. Again, very similar or identical to the cybersecurity framework. Manage organizational assets, a maintained asset inventory to improve cybersecurity resilience by reducing downtime. Okay, so this is what they want to see. A maintained asset inventory. I would imagine with maintained, they simply mean something like an up-to-date, evergreen OT asset inventory. And they're just talking about asset inventory because this includes IT. And scope, data, hardware, software, systems, facilities, personnel. Well, you know what they forgot? They forgot networks, which is funny, and you will see why later as I go through this. So your OT asset inventory certainly must also include a network inventory. Recommended action: IT and OT assets determined to be critical for business or operational functions should be updated on a more frequent basis. So actually, just use OT base. It does it every 24 hours. The one flaw that I see here, and you can see that in other frameworks as well, is the idea, well, you must have this inventory for critical assets, critical for business or operational functions. And that is a misconception. You must have a comprehensive OT asset inventory, because otherwise you don't have the full picture, right? So you're missing out. And I can give you a very simple explanation on why it's not enough to have an idea about your critical assets. Well, because that would not include, as an example, assets or systems that can be abused as an infiltration point. So that particular Windows box, for example, let's just say the Office PC in the electrical workshop, right? It's not critical. No. Why would it be critical? If it goes down the toilet, well, then the shift leader cannot take any notes, right? And you wouldn't be able to surf the internet, but it's not a big deal. Where it becomes important for your risk assessment is as a potential entry vector, infiltration vector. And this is one reason why you are fooling yourself if you think, oh, let's just keep it simple. Let's just produce an Excel table where we hack in all the assets that we believe are critical. So we have our 5 safety PLCs in there, and I don't know, maybe 3 other devices, and that's it. So that is not good enough. You're just fooling yourself. Cost low, yes. If you have an appropriate tool such as OT base. Impact high, I love it. Mitigate known vulnerabilities. That's another one where I don't see why this is listed here in identification, because to me this would better be placed in the protection chapter. But anyhow, I'm just giving you my opinion here. Mitigate known vulnerabilities, reduced likelihood of threat actors exploiting known vulnerabilities, blah, blah, blah. Scope or organizational assets, including the... okay, come on, guys. Aren't you realizing that you're contradicting yourself here? All organizational assets. And that means, well, I also got to have these in my asset inventory, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to identify all the vulnerabilities of those systems that might provide an infiltration vector. Implement a vulnerability management program, blah, 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 monitor risk response, document potential risks, changes, and provide rollback guidance. OT for assets where patching is either not possible or may substantially compromise availability or safety, meaning, well, like most of OT devices, compensating controls are applied, something like segmentation or monitoring. Sufficient controls either make the asset inaccessible from the public internet or reduce the ability of threat actors to exploit the vulnerabilities in these assets. Yes, I would certainly agree. I've said it a couple of times. In OT, network segregation or network security is your mitigation of choice. Next item, obtain independent validation of cybersecurity controls. Validate that implemented security controls are properly configured and working as intended. Well, I'm not sure if this item is placed well here, because it will probably be better placed in the organizational chapter. But anyhow, so in a sense, what they are saying here is, well, engage third-party cybersecurity experts, just do your risk assessment, and ideally by a third party, like an independent consultancy. Yes, absolutely, and that would usually be part of the audit that I have mentioned earlier. Maintain vulnerability disclosure and reporting process. Organizations more rapidly learn about vulnerabilities. Scope all public-facing assets and web domains. Why only public-facing? I don't know why they limit the scope to that. Discovering good faith should be protected. Security text files. Okay. So I mean, yes, I don't see that as a this reporting process. I don't see that as a super important item, but this is just my opinion. I love this one. Document network topology. Isn't that interesting? More efficiently and effectively respond to incidents and maintain service continuity. So what they're saying here is, well, if you don't have a network topology map, then you could face some difficulties in your incident response, right? Because when you want to get an idea of how, where and how propagation could occur, or which other systems could be affected just because they're in the same subnet, it would be rather beneficial to have network topology nailed, okay? I really love this particular item here, because this is something that you usually don't find highlighted in other frameworks. By the way, I want to show you something. I mean, I hope you will get tears in your eyes how network topology diagrams look like in OT base, right? It's just a dream come true. Look at that. Look at all that level of detail. And certainly the best part is they are generated automatically. Right? So this is not manually drawn. So this is automatically created, right? If you move the devices around, if you rearrange the network ports, it's going to be captured automatically. So this is, I just can feel it. This is what CISA has in mind when they talk about network topology. So let's go back here. Next chapter, protect, like protection in the NIST cybersecurity framework. And this is like a bunch of configuration advice. What I mentioned earlier already is, well, I would include vulnerability management here, which also, in a sense, is configuration change, right? So if you change a default password, if you change credentials, or if you update the firmware, right? Both of it is a configuration change. And so that's why I would have placed vulnerability management here. And they limit the scope to some best practices, what everybody would do, like two-factor authentication, stuff like that. Detect. Establish malicious code detection. I don't even need to open this because everybody knows what they're talking about here. Identify adverse events. And that is basically what the majority of people are doing. The majority of OT security people are presently doing, or for the last couple of years, and threat detection, right? So this is about threat detection, identify adverse events, and this is done using the predominant threat detection solutions. Ease of implementation, complex. Yes, I agree. And this gives me another opportunity to point out, if you're doing threat detection, OT threat detection, what you're doing is one tiny little piece of a serious OT security program, right? If you think about all those other areas that we have looked at already, if you believe this would be good enough to identify those adverse events, you're fooling yourself and probably your management, right? So this is not nearly enough. And I think, well, it's a pity that some vendors obviously have managed to create the illusion, well, if you only are able to identify those hackers when they strike, when you can identify them in your network traffic, then you're golden. I think that's just nonsense. You're fooling yourself. Not to mention all the I don't know, 99.9% false positives. And then finally, you respond and recover. And this is one thing that never made sense to me. And this also applies to the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, why they put it into separate chapters or categories. And again, so this is the same thing with the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, where they also make a distinction between response and recovery, because they're both about incident response, if you will, right? And I think it gets particularly striking if you look at the details as they're explained here. So this is about incident planning and preparedness. This is about incident communication procedures. So everything basically is about incident response. And I think everybody would benefit if they just package that into one chapter. It would be much more logical and also easier for people to digest, especially people who are new to OT security. Okay, so not much to say here. Crisis communication methods, blah, blah, blah. That's all fine and dandy. Maybe the one thing that I would highlight here is not just the recovering. Well, maybe they imply this somehow. So I highlighted that some time ago. What was that other paper that we had discussed? They had a particular emphasis on incident response, and unfortunately, that is not something that many organizations actually exercise. And why do I believe that this is underrepresented? Also in this particular CISA document, because it is so cost efficient. The only downside is, well, you must actually exercise, you must train and those incident response procedures, and you must run exercises. So it starts with tabletop exercises, and this is very puzzling to me, I have to admit, because especially when you consider that the vast majority of real life incidents that we're facing these days is ransomware. Well, you know why they have to pay the ransom, all those affected organizations, because they don't have decent incident response procedures. Easiest thing, think about all your backups. When did you, where is the backup? When did you last check if it's real, right? Or how old is it? Simple things like that. And so for that reason, I would have loved to see a stronger emphasis on the incidents, the preparation stage, right? The planning stage. Okay, anyhow, so that's my take on this CISA document. And maybe in closing, I would say I really like this document. I strongly encourage you to read through it and digest it. And there is one particular reason that I believe is reason enough to actually take a look at it. Many of the documents in our space, many of the frameworks and the guidance is just too long. It's too verbose. And these guys have compiled a list of strong activities that will benefit everybody in this space. And at the same time, they leave enough room for interpretation. So they don't go down to the nitty-gritty details, which can be boring and counterproductive, because many of those details in some organizations just don't fly. They are just not viable. And in my opinion, so CISA leaves it open. They leave it open enough to give organizations some wiggle room on how to implement it in the interest of efficiency. So just check it out for yourselves and let me know in the comments what your opinion is about it. See you next week. Bye-bye.